Good evening. It's good to be back at the mission today, and thankful for this opportunity to be back here. Thankful for the services that go on here at this mission, and for the opportunity that goes out, being able to come down this way to make the taping. Just a bunch of old-fashioned missionary Baptists coming, trusting and believing in God and allowing God to take them and use them for His honor and His glory, and not getting it out, not asking for any honor or anything for ourselves. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And for those of you that may not know me, I am Elder Anthony Barber. I'm from Harmony Missionary Baptist Church, just off Trinity Lane in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm the pastor there and a member as well. And if you ever get the opportunity to come and be with us, we'd be glad for you to come. And I know that Brother JC and Brother Wyndham and those that come down here to the mission here at Pleasant Valley would love for you to come down here as well if you ever get that opportunity. And we ask that you do if you can. If you can't, just be prayerful for us. But above all, pray that God would save the lost. Amen. That's the main thing. I've got a message upon my heart tonight that I would like to bring forth for just a few moments of time, and it may sound just a little bit odd to some of you. One of the things that the Lord's laid upon me is the fact that people like to brag anymore. And I think it's time that we realize that we as God's children need to put honor and glory where it belongs. Amen. And it's going to seem a little odd, some of the scriptures that we're going to bring forth as the Lord lays it upon us, but I beg of you for just a few moments of time to bear with us, and we'll try to get the message out the way that God has placed it on our heart. But again, I above all beg that you pray for those that are lost. If you got your Bibles and would like to follow along with us, we'd like to go over to the 6th chapter of the book of Matthew, and Jesus doing the speaking there. We're going to start in the first verse. And I know this is a very familiar reading lesson, but I want to take it as God placed it upon us today. And I want to go over and just talk for just a few moments of time, not so much about the prayer or the Lord's Prayer as some people would want to go and start talking about, but so much as the way that when we give alms unto God, how that we need to be about that. And in the first verse it says, "Take heed that you do not your alms before men, to be seen of them, otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut the door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly." And with mistakes I may have made in our reading, that's reading the first 6 verses of the 6th chapter of the book of Matthew. And instead, I know that many people want to talk about how that one's supposed to pray, and how that today when we talk about prayer, how that people make fun of us as missionary Baptists, for there's those of us that pray out loud, and there's others that pray within themselves, and they'll talk about us, and they'll say how that it is that the Bible says that we're to enter in our closet and to shut the door, and it's all well and good. My friends, I want you to understand, prayer is personal between us and God, and prayer is something that allows us to be able to talk to God and to be able to reach God when we come the right way, that broken heart and contrite spirit unto the Father, my friends. Even those of us that's been saved through and by the grace of God still have to come to God of a humbleness and of that broken heart in order for us to be able to touch touch God, and I want you to know that. But what it talks about there when we talk about being able to enter into thy closet, it means to shut the world out. It don't mean to go into a physical closet, as I've been told in days past and gone, that you've got to go in to a room somewhere and you've got to close the door. That's not what it means. What it means is to shut everything out and focus on God. No, but now, my friends, today I want you to understand that's not what everything that we want to talk about today. What I want to talk about for just a few moments of time is the Bible teaches us, and Jesus says there, when thou givest thy alms, don't sound a trumpet. In other words, when you give unto the church, or you give unto someone, or you give unto to God, my friends, the best that you are able to do, you don't stand up and you don't tell everybody about it, and you don't stand before this world and let everybody know about it, but you keep it within yourselves. And the reason that you do that, my friends, is because, as Jesus said there, he said, the Father which seeth in secret, he shall reward thee openly. And I want you to know that we as God's children do not need to be out there bragging about the things that man can do. We need to be out there talking about the things that God can do. Amen. And that's what I wanted to bring forth as the Lord laid it upon my heart. Because you see, over the last little bit, I hear a lot of preachers standing up on the radio, and I hear preachers standing up upon the TV, and I've seen some. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen some even within our own churches that'll stand before the congregation and they preach a good sermon as God lays it upon them, but then they start putting a big I in it. And my friends, there's no place for that big I, because there's not a thing that a preacher can do that, by themselves. They have to have God's guidance. They have to have the Spirit of the Lord in order to be to bring forth the message, and in order for it to be brought forth unto the congregation, or those that might be about, or this world, my friends. It has to be through and by the Spirit of God. It cannot be by man. And I want you to understand that today. Because, friends, I want you to know that salvation doesn't come by man, it comes by God. Now, what does all this have to do with anything? I know you're wondering, as we've brought forth several different things. Well, what I want you to know today, my friends, is there's people out there in this world that go about bragging about how many people they've saved. Not too long ago, I had somebody come to me and ask me, Brother Barber, how many people have you saved at your church? And I want you to understand something, my friends. The first time that I heard that, the first thing that I did, I said, I've never saved a person. I never can save a person and never will be able to, because salvation is of God. And people today, the same person looked at me and she said, well, my pastor, he went down to such and such country as a mission, and he started a mission down there, and he called back and he was telling us that he saved so many hundreds of people. And I looked at her and I said, my friend, I said, your so-called pastor never saved anybody. If those people get saved, they'll get saved through and by the grace of God. My friends, it'll be of a broken heart and a contrite spirit. It'll not be of man, because it'll be of naught if it's of man. In other words, all he did was lead them straight to hell. There's no big eyes in this. And people need to understand that today. As we as God's children come before you, we need to come before you in the Spirit and in truth with God. We can't come before you any other way. Any man that comes before you saying that I did this or that I did that, my friends, they'll fall flat on their face. And they're not after the glory and honor of God, my friends, which is what we are supposed to be about, is giving God honor and glory as His children, my friends. They're not after that. They're after their own honor and glory. And they don't need that, because all it does is cause a big head. Did you know that? You know, I had a friend one time. I attended a church one time, and a friend of mine, he hadn't gone to church in many years, and when he finally did go to church, he paid tithes that day, and he felt so bad that he felt like after all the years he stayed out, he needed to give what God had asked him to give to that church, because the church was struggling. And he said the Lord laid it upon him. And he said unto me, he said, Brother Anthony, he said, I begged God that nobody find out. He said, but Brother Barber, he said, do you know what happened not long after I walked out the doors of that church? He said, 3 people come to me telling me about how much money I gave. He said, and the funny thing about it was the only person that knew besides me was the person that, the treasurer of that church that took up the collection. And he said, that was wrong. And I said, absolutely. I said, the thing about it though is if you do what God asks of you to do and you keep it within yourself, God shall reward thee openly. But at the same time, I want you to understand, friends, if people are not with God and they do things that are contrary to the will of God, God will bring recompense down upon them for the things that they've done. You know, I have people tell me all the time, well, Brother Barber, I don't have to go to church because I go out here and all these people that are on the streets that come up to me begging, I'll give money unto them and things of that nature. And I believe that I'm doing better that way than I am by helping the church out. My friends, you may be doing better that way, but when you start talking about giving money unto somebody and bragging before this world, you're not doing anything but putting yourself above God, and you're not giving God honor and glory. My friends, as the Bible teaches us, when we give our alms or give our righteousness out unto this world, we're to do it secretly and confidently in God and through Him by the Spirit, and let God reward us openly for it. Not go out here bragging about it. Don't go out here and brag about it, because that's not doing you a bit of good, and it sure ain't doing anybody else any good, and it's not lifting up the Father. You know, I'm afraid that we're a lot more like hypocrites than we are like God's children. I'm afraid of that. And I say that not lightly, I say that wholeheartedly. I think today we've gotten our eyes off of God. And we've gotten our eyes on the things of the world and how the world wants to view us. We worry about what people think about us instead of worrying about what God thinks about us. We need to be more about the Father's business and less about what this world wants. And friends, I hope you understand that today. Because you see, the lost is at stake. If they're going to find God, they're going to have to find the children of God serving a true and living God and following Him in all things. Not doing what they want to do, but doing what God has asked for them to do, and doing it the way that God would have them to do it, and not going out here and trying to brag and put themselves above God in anything whatsoever, but yet let God have all honor and glory out of it. Amen. If they're going to find salvation, they're going to have to be shown that there is a true and living God. And people, friends, you know, we learn by what others do. If you've ever seen a baby grow up, do you know that a baby learns to talk because it's being talked to? Do you know that a baby learns to walk because he sees mama and daddy and brothers and sisters or aunts and uncles walking around and things of that nature? Do you know a baby learns to say certain phrases and certain things? And people today, they think it's funny that if a baby hears something that shouldn't be said and then repeats it, they think it's funny. That's not funny. It's not funny. But what it does is it tells off on you. And it tells the world exactly what type of person you really are. And if you go into a church house and all of a sudden the people in the church think that you're a true child of God, and that you're doing in your own home the things that God has asked of you, and as well as out at work and things of that nature, and then all of a sudden that child gets up and repeats a phrase that they heard you say, my friends, I want to tell you something, that don't look too good upon you. It also don't look good upon that child. But that child don't know no difference. You see, what I'm trying to get at is God's children, we know the difference. We know when the Spirit moves what we're supposed to do. We don't always do it, and I'm not going to say that we do. There's many of us And as pastors included, preachers and pastors included, and I'll throw myself right out there before anybody else. There's many of us that when the Spirit moves upon us, we'll sit down. But the truth is, when the Spirit moves, we need to let God have control. Not try to take it from Him. And I realize, and I said this to the church here not too long ago, as we were in Sunday school, and I'm going to tell you something that people don't like. The reason that we don't see the Spirit in the churches today like we used to see when I was growing up, and my grandparents used to tell me about how that the men and women of God used to come to the church house, and even before they got there, as they were walking down the roads, or as they were traveling by a wagon, or however they got there in the car, or whatever it may be, they were already singing and shouting praises of God, and you could feel the Spirit even before that they opened the doors of the church house. You know why we don't see that today, and why we don't see people standing up and testifying the way that we used to. We don't hear these sainted men and women of old standing up and praising God the way that we used to. I'll tell you why we don't see that is because we know that if we let the Spirit take control, that it will reprove us of the things that we have done wrong. And my friends, today I want you to understand something, that every one of us born into this world, there's not a thing that we can say, a thing that we can do that we can hide from God, because God knows it all even before we say it or do it. And people don't like that. We don't want to be reproved of our own wrongdoings. We don't mind pointing out somebody else's. And we sure don't mind bragging about ourselves. But we don't want to be reproved of the things we're doing wrong. But the truth is, even as Jesus was doing the talking there, and as I said, as the Lord laid it upon me, these scriptures upon me, you might not quite understand how it came about, but I'll tell you. As the Lord said there in the scriptures, He said, "The Father who seeth in secret shall reward thee openly." And my friends, I want you to understand something. God sees everything that we do. He knows everything that we say. He knows even before we speak it. He knows every hair upon our head. He knows when the Spirit moves if we're going to follow or if we're going to turn it away. And friends, He rewards us accordingly as well. Not always is it going to be a great reward. Not always is it going to be something that's a blessing unto us, but He'll also bring recompense as well. If we do the things that are wrong, and we know that we're doing them, you can expect to be striped for it. You know, my grandparents and my parents, they used to whip me. And I won't tell you that they did. I ain't perfect and never was. And I know that there were times that I did things that I shouldn't have done, or there was times that I was told to do something and I wouldn't do it, or I'd kick back because I didn't want to, or I'd smart off things of this nature, and there was nothing wrong with them whipping me. Today, people will tell you that if you even raise a hand to a child, it's abuse. It is not abuse to be whipped, my friends. When it's done in love and done properly, in instruction, my friends, it is done in the right way to instruct that child in the way that they shall go. God instructs His children, and if God does not chastise you, my friends, then you're none of His. And you're the same as a bastard. Because God chastiseth those whom He loveth. And thanks be to God, He does. But you know, we get our heads above ourselves sometimes, and we want to fight our own battles, and we want to turn things around, and we just know that we're going to do it. We just know that we're going to be the ones to make things happen the way that we want it. And when we start doing that, do you know things always go wrong? Have you ever noticed that? I'll be the first to admit. And I'll just use a simple description for you, or example for you. You know, I've got an old lawnmower, old riding mower that gives me a fit. You get above a certain speed on that riding mower, and the belt wants to jump off the deck. Wasn't made completely right. I've taken it to several people to fix it, and they tell me the same thing. It was just the way that it was made. You can order a smaller belt and hope that it won't break, or you can continue with the same size belt and just put it on when it pops off or goes a little bit slower, they'd say. Well, sometimes that belt, it'll jump off and I'll be the only one there at the house. And it takes two of us sometimes to bring that belt out from under those pulleys. They get caught in under that deck and right under that pulley, and it takes a little bit to get it out there. And you'll be fussing and pulling and fussing. And you know, sometimes I'll get to pulling on that and I'm fussing and I'm hollering and I'm thinking, why on earth, why can't this happen? Why is this always going on? And it takes me longer to get it fixed than it does when I finally just calm down and say, Lord, if it's going to be your will, let it be done. I've done that several times, and we all do that. But you see, what we do is we put ourselves first. But we need to understand that we need to put God first. Even in simple things like that, and you're saying, Brother Barber, that's not so. Yes, it is. To be calm and let God take control is much better than being ill and trying to take control yourself. And how do I know that? Now, this may seem awful odd to you, but let's go over to Exodus for just a moment. In the 14th chapter, I believe it is. We'll go over to Exodus there for just a moment. Long about the 14th chapter. And we find over there, and you're saying, well, this won't even go along with it. Yes, it will. Give me just a moment. As the Lord lays it on my heart. Down in the 14th chapter, we find over there, as the Israelites had gone out of Egypt, that God had hardened Pharaoh's heart. They had encamped by the sea over there, and here came Pharaoh and his armies after him. They gathered up against Moses and told Moses, said, there was not a grave there in Egypt, but yet you brought us out of here in this wilderness to die. And Moses said unto them, let's go over to the 13th verse. It says, and Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. In the 14th verse he says, the Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. Now with that, I want to bring forth just one thing. What does this have to do with this entire sermon you're asking? You know, sometimes we need to understand that if we place it in God's hands, He'll take care of it all. And that's what we need to understand. When God asks us to do something, don't go out here and spread the news to all the world. It's not for all the world to know. And if God wants them to know, He'll tell them. But if God asks us to do something, keep it between us and the Lord, and He'll reward you for it. If there's something going on in your life that you feel that you just can't get through, stand still and keep your peace, and God will fight for you. You know, I think that's one of the hardest lessons that I've ever learned in my life, is that sometimes I got to keep my mouth shut. And many of you may know me. If any of you out there may be watching this know me, you know that I don't keep my mouth shut very often. And one of the hardest lessons I've ever learned is that there's times that I've got to keep my mouth shut, because there's nothing I can do. But if I put it in God's hands, He'll take care of it all. And I hope and pray that you get that out of this message today as God laid it upon my heart. If you got nothing else, when we do the things that God asks us to do, leave it in God's hands. Don't try to pick it up. Don't try to tell this world what you've done. Let God take care of it all. And when we get to the point that we just feel like we can't go no more, place it in God's hands and let Him fight our fight. For God loves His people. He loves His children. And God will fight for us. And you know, one of the things that I can tell you that maybe some of the others can't, One of the things that I can sure tell you is the night that the Lord saved my soul, I didn't have no other place to go. I couldn't fight no more against God. I had to turn it over. And when I turned it over, God took control. And He fought that fight for me. He had already gave His life for me. And not just for me, but for all this world. That whosoever might believeth in Him should have everlasting life. He took care of that. And thanks be to God that He did. That's the only way one's going to be saved. Man can't save him, and man don't need to be bragging about trying to. But just let God have control. I hope and pray you got something out of this. That's my message.